I've been at Disney for, like you said, for about 6.5, 7 years now. I was at Sony Animation before that, and this is some of my stuff from Disney early on. And I was getting bored with the way CG films tend to look. There's this kind of sort of simulated realism that we go after, and I think it's really cool to go after that. But I feel like once you've hit that, I feel like a lot of these films feel fairly realistic. For me, it becomes less interesting than what you can do. So I have a couple like really kind of weird sort of simplistic versions of this. To me, this is like the example of what real CG render is. Something that's kind of convincing, physical, something real. And but I like to paint, and I like the expressiveness of design and the choices that are filtered through like a human brain seem a little bit more interesting to me than just making something look real. At Disney, there's a long history of caricature. That's me on the far right, and my production designer next to me. People think we look kind of similar. There's something interesting about the choices people make in caricature that is more fascinating than just doing something that looks real. So I thought, well, I want to do that with motion and with CG animation somehow. And a couple of years ago after Tangled, this started being something that was gaining a little bit of interest in the studio. So I set a goal of maybe doing something that looked more designed and painted in a choice. And in order to do that, you kind of have to break it down into what the logical steps to get there are, because a painted image has a lot of cheats in it. Something that an illustrator does doesn't necessarily work in motion or in 3D. So you start to break it down into the basic parts, like tonal shapes and color, the way you treat edges, things like color bloom and letting kind of things bleed, and then how you treat a little bit of details, and then that little bit of sort of kind of fake camera things like depth of field and film grain and noise that kind of get into painted images that make them look interesting. You need to figure out what each of those things mean in 3D. So we started playing around. Disney started this program called the Spark program, which is similar to what Google does with its 20% time. Let any artist at Disney can take a month out of their year and just do something they're passionate about and get a group of people to kind of join together and make a project. And the only catch is that you have to show it at the end of that month to the whole studio and stand up there with the work and be willing to do that and be proud enough of it to kind of show it to everyone. So there was an artist upstairs that I didn't know named Jeff Turley, and he had done this painting, and I saw it on his blog, and I thought it was pretty cool, and we decided that I thought maybe if I go introduce myself to him, he'll want to play around with this same kind of stuff. So we did this project called Pet, and it was a fake trailer for a movie that doesn't exist. Sort of an homage to things I loved in the 80s, like Gremlins and Flight of the Navigator and stuff like that, like something that would be in that vein, a little bit magical for kids. So we started designing, and these are our first two motion experiments. These are done in Maya without any of the bells and whistles. This is just flat color on 3D geometry. It's the simplest version of 3D animation possible, but what I think is really neat about it is that when you're working on it, it looks just like that. So there's no disconnect between the artist and the final product. So it was our goal to try and make things that, or make a process that was heading in that direction, that was keeping the animator connected with the final image in some way. So this is the little fake teaser we made, and the music we didn't have like rights to music and stuff. That's why it's silent at this point. And there's a little bit of filters and kind of effects in there that we weren't proud of, but we feel like when we showed this to the studio, it set off a little bit of a shockwave of the potential of doing something different that could look, charming and beautiful and designed, but and be very dynamic and interesting, but not be realistic. So it started there. Around the same time, John Kars, who had come down to supervise the animation on Tangled from Pixar, had this project called Paperman. He had developed it a little bit up at Pixar, and because Jeff and I were experimenting with these other looks in animation at the time at the studio, we got pulled onto it to try to do something that looked considerably different than what everything else did that's out there coming out of CG studios. So cool thing about Paperman is we got to make our own software for it. A software developer named Brian Whited made a piece of software called Meander, which let us do illustrated drawings that tracked with 3D animation underneath. John and I come from 3D animation, and we love how directable it is. Say in 2D animation, when you change something, you have to actually redraw it. There's something really cool about 3D that you can make adjustments to the performance and get things just right without redoing everything. So we wanted to work that way, but we also wanted to have it be look illustrated, look in a style that was painterly and that had brushstrokes that were visible. And to do that, we made software that actually let you draw on every 10 frames, maybe, an illustration, and automatically in between those paintings between each other, using the arcs and timing of the CG that's underneath. And it was a joy to work with, first of all, and then second, the work that you saw while you were working looked very close to the finished image. All we put over top was a little bit of the bloom and noise filters. So you were actually able to work in a way that you were kind of informed, and you could make choices that were a part of the image that you were making. So going into Feast, I knew that I really wanted to continue that, to do something in color, to use the same software, to find a way to get other looks, and mainly Jeff Turley, the production designer's paintings moving on screen as close to possible. I didn't want to do anything that looked real. I wanted to be an illustration, something like a children's book. So it all started with this. So this is I filmed all my dinners in 2012. So there's an app called 1 Second Every Day. My friend Cesar Kuriyama coded the app, and I was beta testing it. And I thought there was something really cool about telling a story through dinner. When you watch this with sound, there's something about the changing of sound design from shot to shot. The context of each dinner kind of means something. And the initial idea was that maybe we could tell the life story of a couple or relationship through the meals that they ate. When you're a single guy, your meals look a certain way, you're eating alone. When you go on a first date, you might be trying too hard, so things are very particular and a little bit overdone. Once you're comfortable, you don't care anymore, and it's just kind of cute and romantic, and then you get dumped and you're gorging again, like that kind of thing. All the way through, having children and maybe even old age. So it started there. And this idea also that plates on the table are kind of beautiful, like the arrangement of circles and food's very colorful. It seemed like it'd be a cool thing for animation. So I started with a painting. This is the first thing I ever did for this. And I'm pretty proud that something very similar ends up in this. And your pitch to Disney ends up being kind of you talking at a podium, kind of like this, with a little bit of artwork. So to help that pitch, I called in a friend, Bobby Pontius, who did a few really early character designs, and then Jeff, the production designer, did this painting of sort of like a frat party moment that ended up not being in there, but it kind of sells the idea. It gets across this dog food kind of thing happening. So I had never done story at Disney Animation before, so it was kind of daunting to be thrown into that process without having any experience. And luckily, there's a lot of people there that guide you through it. And I had the opportunity to work with Jim Reardon, who was the head of story on Wall-E and Wreck-It Ralph. And starting it and getting that kind of mentorship right away really helped. And it's nice to work in a place where that kind of thing is possible when Jim is not working on something else. So we started by kind of fleshing out who the characters might be. So this is James and Kirby. You give them jobs so you can kind of figure out, it maybe isn't evident in the story, but it informs like what the set decoration is and how they dress, maybe what time frame it is. So I decided he was a failed school photographer, failed like artistic photographer, but so he's doing high schools, and she's working her way through culinary school as a waitress and wants to be a chef. And then I did the thing that you see pictures of story rooms getting all messy, so I wanted to make sure that I was like making this room a mess, so it looked a mess, and there's pictures of food everywhere. I started using this little teacher software for flowcharts to figure out the mental state of all the characters and watch how they swap. I thought maybe that would be interesting. It helped a lot for me. I don't know if that would help anybody else. And then the first pitch to John Lasseter after you've pitched and you're allowed to make the film is this, and these are the beat boards of the film. These are each of the major moments and what kind of happens, how each character feels about that moment, and the food that's associated with it. And the film kind of ended up being exactly this, except for this last one is not there. The dog died in the last frame of this version. I know. It was totally a terrible idea. Everybody agreed. I was stuck on this thing. I have a friend who took their dog to get a Happy Meal on the way to putting them to sleep, and I thought it had a meal thing, so it would fit. And it was a bookend thing a little bit from the fast food, but turns out it's really sad, and we didn't want to leave people before Big Hero with that. So this is the first version of the storyboards. The date scene was always in the movie at every point, but it changed a lot in each version. So this is the version where it just felt, when I showed it to John, there's like kind of a whimsical score. It felt like it was pushing you. It was from the artist. It felt like it was pushing you to feel something too much, like it was trying too hard to make you feel something. And plus, the camera work was really conventional and centered on the humans a lot. And we watched it. I watched it with John Lasseter, and it seemed to all of us that it wasn't special enough. There was something kind of not clever about it, and it was funny. Cleo Chang did these boards, and she's an incredible story artist. But there seemed to be something missing that wasn't quite special enough. It wasn't clever enough. So I was directed to go back and think about what exactly inspired the short in the first place, and what it was that kind of got me there. And I looked at this video for a while and thought, well, what if we just made a rule that the short feels like this, that like there are cuts that don't make a lot of sense, and that the food is always right in the middle, and that we tell the story that way, and we let the human life kind of be in the background. And so the final version of the date scene looked like this, which was pretty close to what it ended up being. And it didn't have a score. It wasn't forcing you to feel something. It was just source sound, it's called, just the sound of the environment of the world. And the only time we put score in there was once Winston made a choice to be a little bit more than human, to kind of rise, or a little bit more than a dog, to kind of rise to a human intelligence and do something different and make a change. So you never know exactly where things are going to go, but I think if you remember what you promised in your pitch and the thing that inspired you in the first place, and that actually connected to people, a lot of times using that as kind of a touchstone to get back to can help. So at the same time we're doing story, we're figuring out how things are going to look. So we made a poster first. Jeff came on, he made a poster so you can put it on your door so everybody else knows you're making something, and it feels good to have a poster. It feels like it's real. Before there's a poster, it doesn't feel like a movie, really. And then we started doing these moments of joy, what that could be like. When you're making something that looks realistic, it's very easy to say, like, make it look like this. That's real. But when you're not doing something realistic, you have to be very specific about the rules of your design. So in this case, we made this choice to have the lighting inspired by natural photography, that it was not we're going to use colors that were kind of wild and out there, really. But all the color shapes are going to be simple and graphic, and that the edges of this color will have this kind of construction paperish kind of crunch to it, which is a challenge once you're moving things in space. And then a little bit of that line work that we had in Paperman, a little bit of that sort of human touch at the end to make what we thought was pretty cool. And this image ended up being sort of the guide for what it was going to look like in the end. So then you go into designing characters. Shiyun Kim did about 100 drawings of dogs, all small ones. We knew we needed a small dog that had a two-tone pattern so you could see him turn, because in the simple design we had, there was no detail to tell if it was rotating. So you need to make sure that the actual pattern of the dog had something to tell you how it was positioned geometrically. And then it had to be a dog that no Disney movie had, like was mentioned earlier. And so I went back and watched all of them. And it turns out a Boston Terrier is the first American breed of dog. And you do a lot of dog research, too, in this process. And And it seemed like a cool one to have, and it's kind of trendy now, I guess. Shiyun also went and did a bunch of drawings of the family in moments of the film. I thought it was really cool. This one I love, this lazy one with the boxer spit. There's something kind of neat about seeing the designs in life to know if they're right, you know. And then we bring in puppies. Thank you. These dogs all have wonderful diets on their own. We spoiled them for an afternoon and fed them peanut butter. It was important to me that the dog moved realistically. I didn't want this to be anthropomorphic. I didn't want it to be a human-ish dog. So we wanted to make sure that the actual locomotion was fairly accurate. And then Shiyun goes in and tightens all those drawings. He makes it, he does another 100 drawings that are of the one that we were kind of going for, the one that I chose. And then one thing kind of unique to Disney, which is pretty amazing, is that people like Dale Bear are around. Dale has been working at Disney since like 1965. He worked on the original Robin Hood, was his first movie, and he's an incredible 2D animator. And we have a bunch of 2D animators around to inspire, to give us ideas, to do things with the design and shape of the character that we wouldn't do in a realistic setting. And a lot of the things he was doing, about the way he was making the legs bend, about the shapes he was kind of using to define Winston, got into the film and got into the rigs, and it's stuff that we wouldn't do otherwise, I think. So it's pretty neat to have that. That's about the first, he did about 14 shots early on before we really had the story finished as we're figuring out what the character might look like. So moving on to actual production, we start to refine the design, make it a little bit tighter. You start to do costumes. I wanted this to take place around like 1994. So the cargo pants, for sure. The like tropical stripe, that doesn't exist anymore. And the like 3-stripe sweater, I think, is a kind of uncommon thing. And then I love the Red Bay meat packers. You only see that in the short for like 2 seconds, and I wish that was a little bit more of a thing. Brittany Lee then did a bunch of the costumes for Kirby. She went to my Facebook and found my wife's wedding dress and put that in there. It's very cute. She actually drew 8 wedding dresses and then circled the one I was supposed to pick. So I'd remember. One of our amazing animators, Hyunmin Lee, was responsible for refining the design through modeling. So she's really good about making sure that the shapes are specific. And this is the way we kind of give notes in the studio. We just draw over things, and it's really easy to deliver that back to an artist and guide them that way. The final piece of design is the food. It had to be iconic and simple. It's only on screen for a few seconds each thing. And we actually brought in a food stylist from Taco Bell. And she informed us that, in California, at least, you have to use the real food from the restaurant when you're doing food photography. So what they do is buy 1,000 tacos, and they disassemble it, and they reassemble the perfect taco. And what the perfect taco is one where you can see all the layered ingredients very specifically. So when you look at it, your brain tells you what it tastes like. So we made sure that in the iconic versions of food like this, we were doing things like that. We were making sure that you saw all the ingredients and they were layered very beautifully. Jeff drew them and painted them very close to the way that they're seen in the film, like the nachos are being dropped into his mouth. So Jeff drew them as this sculpture, this modern art. And then the food that Winston considered bad, we drew very square to camera in design. So it's kind of a less interesting way of looking at it. And in the film, we couldn't actually do that because the cameras weren't set up that way, but I think it's a neat way to design this stuff, and he's really smart. So thinking about point of view and how this thing is actually going to look now, we start to make some real goals. So this became our goal. We want to make that move, and this is our first attempt at that. And this was designed to be a shot that had like every step of the process represented in some way, and a little bit of character in there too. And it wasn't finally there. This doesn't have the hand-drawn line over top. This is all straight out of Maya. So we realized that we wanted a few little hints of that line that we used in Paperman to accentuate the design and the appeal. So Jeff painted these guides, and that's our animated version of it. And then the same thing with designed lighting. It became important that lighting was not realistic. It wasn't just a toon shader. We wanted to find ways to actually shape and design the light work like his paintings. So I'm going to walk through a little bit of a production of one shot so you can see how it is from beginning to end. When we start making a film, like when you finish Story, when Story is approved and it's going to move on into shot production, and this was about a year ago, January 13th, we had from Story finishing, we had 14 weeks to finish the film, the actual images. It was due April 28th, based on festival deadlines and stuff like that. So out of Story, we have this process at Disney that I absolutely love called workbook turnover. And this is the process where you get all the people that are going to be responsible for making your film, all the leadership of each department, animation, effects, and color. And you all get in a room together and figure out every shot. And you make a promise that this is what's going to be. So we started planning on, that's when you really design the look of the movie beyond Story. And we made this rule that if the food was in the light, it meant that Winston liked it. And if it was in the shadow, it meant he didn't like it. And if it was cut, we would say that's stuff he's not sure about. We would cut the food with light. So we drew every shot with a little bit of a simple value study. And then this particular shot looks like this in that form. And then this is the storyboard version of it. And then from there, it goes into 3D layout, which is just us kind of placing objects in the space as they need to be. And then animation blocking, which is the really simplest and roughest version of what an animated shot looks like. Adam Green did this. He was the head of animation on the Mickey short last year. And then this is the real blocking. This takes him about 4 or 5 hours usually, this kind of shot. And then once he's got it this far, he'll show it to the group, and I act like a dog. And this is us kind of sitting in a room together, a bunch of animators, the animation supervisor, and myself, and talking about what the shot needs and what's working and what isn't working. And this is Brian Scott, our head of animation, drawing over the shot, and this is how we deliver our notes. It's just drawings over each frame. And the system is set up so as soon as you're done in that room, you can go open that shot up back at your desk. And this is a little Maya plugin we wrote because we were being very specific about the shapes, the graphic, simple shapes that the dog was going to be. And we made this thing called Sil Sketch, which lets you just draw the edges. And it's aware of external and internal silhouette shapes in the model. And it's really helpful to get a very specific kind of, if you want a straight line, you could really make it straight. You don't have to kind of push it and worry about it too much. It's just kind of instantly there. And it's an amazing tool and really helpful. And we use it on all our films now, but we really kind of sharpened it on this film. And then this is what the final animation looks like. And from there, we go to a step called technical animation. Josh Sobel did this, and this is all the things that are moving, but they're not living. So like the whiskers bouncing, the rug in the background, the shoelaces, I think, have a little bit of motion on them. And then the effects department does stuff like the kibble and the food. The eyes always look weird for some reason. This is effects works in Houdini, and for some reason the translation of the eyes isn't always quite perfect. But it doesn't matter, because the food is what we were looking at. So he would do the food, and they would do like any kind of hand-drawn steam or splashes, things like that, or what effects do. And then they also delivered us this, which is called live air, which is the representation of dust, these dust particles in the air. And that was important because our look was very simple. And if we were going to blur the camera, a lot of times the floor was just one plane of color, and you couldn't tell if it was blurred or not because there's no detail. So these little dust particles in the air gave you a sense of where the focus range was. Then Jeff delivered this painting, and in most movies, the painting is a guide. In our case, it was 100% what we wanted it to look like. We wanted the film to finish exactly like that. So it starts with surface color, and then goes in, the artist will retone it to look close to the painting, add design light shapes in there, and then edge breakup, which is that little bit of construction paper. And that was another plugin that was written for Maya and Nuke to kind of make a paper-ish texture that moved with the character that would be kind of similar to what the Photoshop analogous, like the paper texture in Photoshop would be. And then that's the finished shot with the dust particles being a lot smaller. And this is me. So Adam, who animated that shot, drew me like this. I used to share an office with him for about 1.5 years. And when I animate, I tend to do this to get, and I flip the image upside down and backwards. You try to get fresh eyes. I do it when I paint too. You're trying to see things abstractly a little bit and notice things that you didn't see before. And I learned that through making the film itself, the story side of it, you don't really get that chance to be objective and fresh that much. And it's through the contributions of everybody else that comes in to help you, because animation is such a collaborative art form that you get to experience that freshness again. And it's really kind of neat to it's like a one-of-a-kind experience, I think, to kind of get to have that happen to you as you're making the film. And a similar thing happens as you're finishing the movie. The first time we saw it on stage we saw it, the orchestra was recording and the image is finished behind. And it gives you this 100% sort of refreshed version of what an audience might think while watching this. And it's absolutely amazing to go through. And then the same thing when you get to show it to an audience. So every audience, it's super exciting to get to kind of show it and experience that. So thank you for watching.